Welcome back to Off the Pitch, the podcast where we chat with individuals working within and shaping the game of soccer from off the pitch. Today's guest is Brett Johnson, who, among many things, is the co-founder and chairman of USL Championship side Rhode Island FC, and he is also a minority owner of the newly English Premier League promoted club Ipswich Town. Brett gave us a rundown of what his career has looked like so far before soccer, having had success in the business world. He breaks down the differences between being a US soccer club owner and an English football club owner, and he gives us a big deep dive into the project that they've got in Rhode Island, which most notably includes a $100 million plus stadium project. Brett is truly an impressive individual and businessman, and I know that we were extremely excited when he agreed to come onto the show. I know there's going to be a ton of value that you'll take away from listening to this episode, so without further ado, let's get into it. All right, Brett, thank you again for joining us today and spending some time to have a chat about yourself and your career and all of the exciting projects you're involved in soccer world. David and I, of course, know a bit about yourself now and your background, but for anyone who isn't familiar at all with you, do you mind just sharing some time, giving a quick rundown of who exactly Brett Johnson is and what your career has looked like from, let's say, starting at college right up to now?
So briefly, I live on the left coast. I live in Los Angeles, but born and raised on the East Coast, New York City, and then I went to a high school, boarding school in Connecticut. Then I went to a university in Rhode Island. I went to Brown, and I'll swing back to it. But that was a big part of the genesis of my Rhode Island project, which you see behind me. But after Brown, I moved to the Bay Area. I was in San Francisco for 5 years, and I did some M&A work for a private equity shop, which was great experience. Ultimately, I joined a computer accessory company called Targus. A guy in England invented the very first computer carrying case. And that was 1983 that he founded the company, which was the birth of the portable computer market. I joined Targus kind of right time, right place. I was moved to London, and it was the 5 years based in London, traveling all over the world that I say, gave me the front row seat to the Premier League and what I call sort of the religion by which the world reveres the other football, But ultimately, I was brought back to Orange County to run the whole company, which I did for 5 years, and then we sold it. And then after the sale, I started a private equity company, which I have with my twin brother. It's a family office called Benevolent Capital, and everything that we do, we put under that umbrella. But it's now become a diverse venture capital, private equity, professional soccer, and then real estate platform. But I think for the benefit of probably your listeners, if you will, my primary focus in football has been over the last 10 years. I had an epiphany that Phoenix, Arizona was the biggest and best market in the States without a proper football team. And as I say, long story short, I bought a stake in Arizona United, which was then a USL Division III club. I brought in an incredible group of partners who are still involved with the club today. We rebranded it to Phoenix Rising. And then from there, I've been very, very fortunate. I helped lead the investment of an English club called Ipswich Town, which is doing well. And then I really increasingly saw what I call the benefits of the United Soccer League, USL, right market, right stadium, right ownership group. I really feel that USLs are going to be one of the best places to invest in professional sports. And so I started really coveting an opportunity to find exactly that. As I said, right market, right stadium. And Rhode Island really stood out. It's almost consistently in the top 10 for ratings for soccer media. And it was there's only one other market that was on the top 10 with any consistency that didn't have a team. And it was sort of a blue ocean opportunity and then the last factor in my decision was that a baseball team in Rhode Island picked up and left the state. They moved to Massachusetts. And with that loss, it became very clear that it was a good opportunity. And so at that point, I bought the rights. And a quick 5 years later, we're playing soccer or football, as I should say.
I'm sure it's quick in retrospect, but throughout those 5 years, I'm sure it wasn't too quick. No, that's great. Thanks for providing some context. We'll dive into pretty much every piece of what you just, glanced over. But before we get into any of the nitty and gritty, obviously I'm aware of the fact you were a rower in college. And it sounds like, the Premier League was kind of the eye-opening, oh, there's this sport, that's ruling every other country in the world, essentially. What part of soccer did it play any part in kind of your upbringing, or was it more once you got into kind of your adulthood that it became something you were interested in?
I played at a very mediocre level in school. Growing up in New York City, we played in Central Park, which I'm fairly confident Central Park has never produced one professional soccer player in the history of its existence. So not exactly the proving ground
Yeah.
for the sport. And then when I showed up to boarding school, we had kids from all over the world that honestly were playing just a different sport than I was. And I kind of recognized, as I say, my future in sport lay elsewhere. But I always loved the game and always had a passion. It was the '94 World Cup in the United States, starting to follow both the men's and women's on the U.S. men's national team. But as I say, it was the time overseas. It was the time outside of America, being based in England. Look, you don't want to live in England and not be a football fan. That's not a fun existence because it dominates, rightly so. It's just there's nothing like English football, and every other street corner has its own team. So, and the drama of the FA Cup, the brilliance of the Premier League, the best and brightest week in and week out. I mean, obviously I'm biased, but I think Championship, dollar for dollar, is the most exciting league in the world. But again, I'm probably biased based on what's going on with Ipswich at the moment. So, but in short, what I really started to pick up on was football was the ultimate icebreaker. I'd be, in Singapore in a business meeting, and as I was finding ways to try to break the ice, if you will, just kind of to lower barriers initially in a business lunch or business meeting, I started recognizing what I call just the benefit of bringing up football, because almost without exception, everyone had a connection to a team. They were a Man U fan. Asia at that time for sure. Man U was dominant. Or you talk about the World Cup and they start to talk about, how excited they would be, et cetera. So it was that connectivity with the beautiful game that kind of gave me the religion when I came back. And again, I started to recognize, I was starting to look at MLS and their growth. And I was listening to Don Garber talk about the MLS expansion plans, and candidly, he didn't mention Phoenix, and that seemed odd to me. So I just, putting my entrepreneurial hat, that's kind of the big pivot, if you will.
Yeah. And we'll get into a bit more about Phoenix. You said you had the epiphany and kind of the aha moment. So we'll get into what was behind the aha. But one thing you didn't mention that we found was you spent some time in Denmark. So chat us through that opportunity, how that came about, what your time was like there. And then, we'll kind of refer back to it a bit later on about how it's kind of impacted things now.
So I got involved with Denmark via Jordan Gardner, who I'm sure you guys are aware of. Another Bay Area based soccer guy. But Jordan and I've got, the utmost respect. I think I first met Jordan because he was involved with the Burlingame Dragons. But Jordan put together that ownership group, and I invested some money in joining the board. And loved being involved with Helsinger. It did fall during a fair bit of time during COVID. So actually, amazingly enough, I never ever had the opportunity to go and visit. Which is a real shame. But I think Danish football is phenomenal. The quality and depth of those leagues, the ability to develop players both domestically and internationally. Like, I think it's a great proxy for why I love European football. And as I said, I've got the utmost respect for Jordan Gardner. I think he's carved out a very nice sort of role for himself in global football, and kind of his gravitas continues to go up and to the right. So I think for him in particular, it was a real learning experience in terms of putting the capital together, doing the due diligence, acquiring a club, getting the club. We knew it was going to get relegated when we were acquiring it. It was part of the thesis, but to his credit, he got it promoted, which was fantastic. And then at a certain point, it just became clear it would be in better hands if we sold it to a local group, which is what we did.
All right, and then so let's get into stateside. All right, so with Phoenix, yeah, what was it? Obviously, it sounds like there was a lot of data, right, when it came to the Rhode Island decision. And Phoenix felt, maybe it felt more of just like that missing link
to your piece, so it wasn't in anyone's expansion plan, and you think it probably should have been. So what was it behind the city and the people that you thought they were ripe for a professional soccer team?
Yeah, so Phoenix, one of the fastest growing cities consistently year in and year out in the United States. One of the largest, I think, it's probably fifth biggest right now. And then the demographics, a big portion of the Phoenix population is Hispanic. A great percentage of that populace actually comes from Mexico. It's a fairly homogeneous Hispanic population in Phoenix. And so, understanding those demographics, led me to kind of feel confident that with the right brand, right location, Phoenix would be an outstanding market. And my initial thesis was really focused on what I'll call sort of, at the time, USL was a clear pathway to MLS. You could see, through multiple examples, that trend. So I really, at that time, was very focused on a business plan that was predicated on taking the club up to MLS. One of my partners who I'm very close to, and we work very closely on Ipswich together, Berke Bakai, he ended up getting Didier Drogba to come and join our ownership group, which is I really put down as one of the most incredible sort of sports athlete recruiting achievements. I would equate it to LeBron James deciding to finish his career with a G League basketball team. Just like and conceptually, like everyone would be like, no way that happens. So, Didier Drogba, his goes without, needs no introduction. The thought that he decided to come at the time and play for a Division III sanctioned U.S. team called Phoenix Rising to finish up his career. I mean, he did become part of our ownership group, but Didier really helped put Phoenix Rising on the map. And we've been very fortunate. We won the championship last November. That was our third trip to the finals. But I think Phoenix Rising's been an outstanding USL franchise. But in the 10 years that I've been involved with the sport, from my evolution, as I said, I've kind of started to really shift my time and attention towards USL as I guess a league of choice because of the economics. I mean, with the utmost respect to Major League Soccer, the franchise fee is likely going to be $600 million in the next round. When I first got involved with the sport less than 10 years ago, I think at that time it was $60 million. So, God bless MLS. It's great if you can get it, but I think $600 million before you turn the lights on, before you build a stadium, there's some other ways to put money to work beyond MLS, overseas, USL. That again, none of it's easy, but I think if you can get the right stadium and you can focus on the right areas of the business, are very compelling.
Getting into Phoenix, one big thing we like to do on the podcast is kind of strip back the curtain. And everyone sees things on a surface level of, X individual purchases club, X club goes into X league, and you just kind of see it as it is, and you kind of assume, oh, it's just you just need X amount of money, and then this thing happens. But can you kind of share underneath what it actually looks like of coming on board at Phoenix and how that process happens, the criteria that needs to be checked off for you or anyone to be able to come on as an owner, and just kind of pull back that curtain?
Yeah, I mean, I guess by answering your question correctly, Phoenix Rising is blessed with an incredible ownership group. A great number of the investors are based in Phoenix, and that was an important game changer. At the time when I owned a stake in Arizona United, I'm parachuting in from Los Angeles to try to make things happen, try to find a stadium deal, try to talk to a local politician. And the reality is, respectfully, I had no juice, if you will, no relationships there. So I really needed to find what I call sort of a great group of connected, passionate, deep-pocketed Phoenicians. And I met Mark Detmer, who had just moved to LA from Phoenix. Mark is about as well known in the state of Phoenix. It's amazing. You couldn't ask for a better person to kind of partner up with. But Mark was instrumental in bringing Berke Bakai on board. I had the opportunity to meet and get connected to an incredible individual in Tim Reister, who has the largest ad agency in the state of Arizona, who had a couple boys in the youth soccer programs. But you just start to think about the talent that started to aggregate into the rebirth of the club. We rebranded it to Phoenix Rising, which candidly was the name I originally thought up when I kind of had the epiphany that I wanted to bring soccer to Phoenix. And as I said, at the time, I wasn't aware of USL. I did a little Google search and saw there was a team called Arizona United and kind of recognized, look, the pathway to MLS was likely through Arizona United. And then, as I say, I bought half that team at that point, and then ultimately brought in these partners. My original partner exited from Arizona United. But the key to so much of what in any sports endeavor is getting the right people, getting the right people on the pitch, getting the right people off the pitch. And so I felt very fortunate with the quality of the ownership in Phoenix. But as I say, none of this stuff's for the faint of heart. Phoenix was originally playing on tribal land and had a great location. We picked up and we moved to another partnership on tribal land. We've then picked up again, and now we've moved to City of Phoenix land right near Sky Harbor Airport. So I think in hindsight, the multiple moves with the stadium have been a challenge for Phoenix Rising. And, I think that ownership group, candidly, I've really moved away from Phoenix Rising. I still have some equity, but I've never been the principal owner. I've kind of gone all in on Rhode Island. And for a lot of reasons, both sides, myself and the board, the ownership group of Phoenix Rising several years ago felt it made sense, given my focus on Rhode Island, to really step down from any day-to-day involvement with Phoenix. So, which is what I did. But anyway, it's a long, long way of saying that ultimately, I think the fate of Phoenix Rising, it's going to be interesting to see what ends up happening. Do they potentially look to make a run at Major League Soccer, or do they potentially go all in and stay in USL? But as I said, there's only so many markets in my mind that can justify 600 million plus franchise fees. That it's a Phoenix, it's a Las Vegas. Like, the list doesn't get very long. And then, I also think there's a certain inherent ceiling in terms of how many MLS clubs can you have in the absence of promotion relegation. How many does it really make sense at some point for that league to have? So anyway, I don't need to answer that because I focus again on USL, and I went all in, but I was specifically coveting a market that didn't have a team, that had great passion for the beautiful game, and Rhode Island again was top of the list.
No, definitely. I definitely agree that with more and more teams that come in over, let's even call it the next decade, and there's no promotion relegation, it's just going to be diluted beyond belief. And whatever kind of intra playoff extra setup they can have to add some kind of competition will be interesting, but not quite as fun. So to get into road,
I view myself as one of the largest proponents of promotion relegation, certainly in the American game. I believe it's sorely lacking. I think it's a complete game changer in terms of, sort of on the pitch and off the pitch. Like, there's nothing to engage a fan base more than a promotion and or relegation battle.
Absolutely. And you're definitely, we'll get into it, but you're definitely in the thick of one over in England as well. So you can definitely see firsthand, the impact it makes across all facets of the business and the community and the fans of having that excitement, especially given last year Ipswich were even one league lower, and now they've got a real chance at playing, against the top guys next year.
I pinch myself every day relative to it. But but regardless, the drama in English football in general, the drama specifically in Championship, you could put the greatest Hollywood writers in a room and they couldn't script some of the storylines that are going on right now.
Yeah, definitely. And that's even, you just hear about the ones in England because they get the attention. But imagine all of the other countries that have even more perfectly scripted movies that are happening every season. But to get back into Rhode Island, so obviously I'm sure you learned a ton with your time coming in Arizona and learning kind of the ins and outs of ownership, maneuvering around stadium changes, the league. What are some of the key lessons that you've learned then that you've now brought in to starting up Rhode Island?
I guess in no particular order, the value of owning and developing and building and running a true soccer specific stadium. That a big part of the business plan was making sure that we could build, what you see behind me. And it has to be, I joke often that when one day I write my book on professional sports ownership, it'll be the shortest book ever. It's location. The reality is, a great stadium, which we're building in a great location, which we have, will be a game changer for not only the state of Rhode Island, not only for the sport of football, but also what I'd say for Southern New England. You are really hard pressed in greater New England to look at or find what I'll call really fantastic soccer specific stadium. You know, the Revolution, with the utmost respect, play in an NFL stadium in Foxborough. There's a group in Boston that's trying to work on reconfiguring football stadium, a Boston-owned football stadium, you know, which is, I wish them the best on it, and I hope they can get it done. And but it's not easy. None of this stuff is easy. So that's why I feel the real superpower with Rhode Island is the fact that we're a year away from having this stadium completed. It's right off I-95, which is the major highway, right outside of Providence, right down the road from Boston. And then obviously not only will we have the men's team, I have every intent to launch a women's team. But then I also feel like these stadiums, increasingly the growth of lacrosse, the growth of rugby, flag football, obviously American football, you know, concerts. So the optionality in terms of turning the turnstile to make these stadiums profitable keeps increasing. And then over time, more and more foreign clubs want to come to the United States to build their brands up, so they need a place to play. You got the World Cup coming back. You're gonna have international clubs that are want to get some minutes here. So again, it makes me very, very bullish on what I call sort of stadiums as an asset class, in particular rectangular stadiums. So Major League Soccer led the way. They started recognizing, candidly, the league was going to die based on their initial strategy of playing in NFL stadiums. And it was the Columbus Crew and the initial soccer-specific stadium that truly transformed the sport. And so kind of USL taking a page from that book, see what happened in Louisville with the USL team there, Colorado Springs. Colorado Springs is now one of the greatest franchises, certainly in USL, but certainly one of the best experiences for soccer in North America. Incredible pitch, incredible stadium, and a great location with a great ownership group. So anyway, it's the blueprint for what everyone needs to aspire to do, to really transform not only USL, but what I just call soccer in general in this country.
Yeah, definitely. And to your point, you know, everyone knows that you can't really turn a profit over a long term through just ticket sales and even merchandise sales and any other food and beverage sales and anything that comes with just a typical match day experience. And so within that, and we can see it, you know, in the rendering behind you, the plans that a lot of different ownership groups and different clubs are doing now about making this kind of more diverse real estate property project. And that's definitely, I'm sure, what will be included in that book that you write in the future of how to really, you know, turn some money in this game. Can you chat to us through, you know, kind of prior examples of different ownership groups and clubs that have made that move to really building, you know, the retail area, the housing area, and essentially just building this new little downtown, like just creating a new downtown around these different elements? What other examples in the past have you looked at that you've kind of brought into the Rhode Island plans?
Yeah, again, a great question. So in my backyard of Los Angeles, you have a perfect example in LA Live. Not, 15 years ago, going down to LA, I don't know what the exact date was, but until you really started to anchor downtown LA, with the Lakers, with the Kings. Now, obviously, not too far away, you have LAFC in their stadium. So the broader sort of transformation of downtown LA, but then, it's not just in the past, before you built LA Live, which again is now a nice series of hotels, residential towers, et cetera. I mean, you have empty nesters that are selling their, homes in Beverly Hills and now moving to downtown LA. And then, enjoying the sports games and restaurants and the supermarkets. And, so I think that's a good example of how sports as an anchor can start to transform a neighborhood. SunTrust Park in Atlanta is another perfect example with transformation relative to that area, relative to what I'll call the Atlanta Braves. I saw something recently, the staggering the amount of added revenue and equity value that the Atlanta Braves are seeing because of SunTrust Park. So I guess what I feel proud of is kind of taking what I'll say is the playbook of the major leagues and bringing it to what I'll call emerging or secondary markets, and being able to figure out a pathway to finance a stadium, build a lot of markets are completely desperate for housing. So we intend on building 750 multifamily units. Certainly a portion of it's going to be affordable. That's much needed, not just in Pawtucket, Rhode Island, where we're based, but it's needed in Rhode Island. And then over time, this will become a live, work, play destination. You'll have retail. You should have hospitality at some point. It's great, obviously, for a hotel. Figure out maybe some portion of it office. Office is a little bit challenged right now, post-COVID, if you will. But there's a transportation hub a half mile away from the site. You can get to downtown Boston in 50 minutes from the site, so people could ostensibly use it as a bedroom community. So real estate was always a big part. And, I saw an opportunity early on with a program that was launched called the Opportunity Zone program, where it's an incentive for private capital to go into opportunity zones. And so all the surrounding real estate of the state is an opportunity zone. And it's partly how I've been able to attract what I consider to be one of the best ownership groups, because investors are looking for ways to make catalytic investments, social and economic impact. And, I'm biased, but I think what we're doing in Rhode Island really checks all those boxes.
Yeah, well, we've seen just in the first part of the season that everything you guys are doing in Rhode Island is proving to be fruitful. We've touched on the fact that you're one of the lead investors also in Ipswich Town. So as Ipswich is obviously a storied club with a lot of history, and Rhode Island is now a brand new startup and expansion team, what are the things that you're taking from Ipswich and just the English soccer culture in general, and applying them to Rhode Island as well? Because obviously it's a completely different environment. You're building everything up brand new. So what are some of the things you're trying to replicate, and what are some of the things that you're trying to keep different?
Yeah, so I feel very fortunate in that Mark Ashton, who's CEO of Ipswich, we brought him over from Bristol City. I truly rate him as arguably, if not the best, one of the best CEOs in football writ large, but certainly English football. And I always joke that prior to kind of, being blessed to have Mark Ashton come and run the day-to-day for Ipswich, I feel like English football is where smart money goes to die if you don't have a Mark Ashton. You can countless examples of investors, domestic and international, that have bought clubs in England that have not, what I would probably say, not found or put in place their Mark Ashton to really kind of regret that. So I feel we've been very fortunate to have Mark in seat. Among many brilliant things, he was instrumental bringing Kieran McKenna, who's truly, proven himself as one of the best young managers in English football. So at the end of the day, one thing that's very applicable from Ipswich to any club, if you will, and in particular Rhode Island, is getting the right people. Always comes down to the right people, right front office, right head coach, right technical staff, right players with the right attitude, and so I think USL, again, I think increasingly USL superpowers, it's going to be the best league in the world for providing quality minutes to young players. And said differently, the right USL franchise has the ability to give a bigger crowd to watch quality young players, unlike any other league in the world. And that's something that we really need to focus on, because I think over time you're going to see more and more foreign clubs that are going to look and want a link, in particular the States, and I think specifically with USL, to tap into not only the ability for us to give quality minutes to potentially some of their academy kids, but also to look at some of the incredible talent that obviously the United States is starting to produce.
And then you kind of mentioned it also within your answer, but naturally when you're running a club or investing in a club, and especially building one from the ground up, it's a lot about getting the right people, especially in the front office, to do everything day to day. What are the things that like, I guess, that are culturally different between Ipswich and here? Like what does the business side of things focus on, and how do you guys acquire fans and keep them engaged differently in each place?
I think the quick answer is obviously, Ipswich, 150-year plus history, needs almost no introduction to anyone who's kind of in follows football. The history of the club, the gravitas, the installed base. I mean, we've got May 4th, we've got our final, I pray it's our final home game of the season, because that'd be very good news. But that's the toughest ticket for any Ipswich fan in the world to get a hold of right now. The transformation in the 3 years that we've invested in Ipswich, I think there was, shortly before we acquired the club, I think they had kind of what I call a low water mark, where I believe they had about 7,000 fans in the stadium on a 30,000 seat stadium. I mean, candidly, the supporter base had really lost faith in the club, and you could see countless examples of other clubs that were in similar situations. They've been completely revitalized with new ownership group, and it begins and ends with performance. It's really tough to support a club that's kind of going the wrong direction. I think relative to Rhode Island, the demographics of Rhode Island are fantastic. It's an incredibly, the pride in the state, their passion for sports is fantastic. But technically speaking, Rhode Islanders have not had something to call their own. Even the baseball team that was there was an affiliate of a Boston club. It was the Pawtucket Red Sox, not the Rhode Island, professional team, if you will. If you're a Rhode Islander, you want to go support a team, you're going out of state historically. You're going to Massachusetts, you're going to New York, you're going to Connecticut. So I think part of the calculus for us launching the team this year, partnering up with Bryant University, is it was very determined on our part to effectively introduce the state to our intent in terms of how we play as a club, how we recruit, and then giving everyone what I'll call a taste of the product before moving into prime time. Kind of getting the kinks out, getting that, for lack of an expression, the freshman year out of the way. So as we move in the second season, get the stadium complete. And what I'll tell you is, again, a quality stadium like we're building in that location, I'm fairly confident I can convert almost anyone to becoming a football fan when they come and experience that. Like it really, I saw countless times at Phoenix Rising, we have a great stadium in a great location. And the amount of times where people would come up to me and say, "Hey, this is the first game I've ever been to. I wasn't a soccer fan, but man, I'm all in now. Like I'm going to become a season ticket holder." Like, you got the core base that drank the Kool-Aid in the sport a long time ago, but you still have an incredible number of people who have never gone to a proper football match, who have never really seen what I call the drama of a 1-1 game, a drama of a tie sometimes, and the beauty of the running clock. So anyway, just one of many, many things that makes me so bullish and so grateful and so blessed to do what I get to do and where I get to do it and who I get to do it with. But World Cup coming back in 26 is going to completely take this sport to a whole nother level. And there are a host of other things that are also doing the same thing. Lionel Messi's had a massive, massive impact. I mean, the amount of people I know that have started to tune in, wanting to buy tickets, and that's important. So I think every single one of those things create more what I call, it converts a lot of people who don't tune into this stuff to really transform and start to really buy into why this game is so beautiful.
Yeah, definitely. And I think and we'll get into kind of looking forward and the future of, US soccer kind of over that decade with the World Cup and everything else, all the tournaments that are coming, and hopefully the Women's World Cup bid also gets approved. But going back in,
praying for that 27. So to have back to back, and I really hope the powers that be, or however that gets decided through FIFA, that they do it, because and it's been so exciting to see the quality and growth of the women's game. And in my backyard, I go when I can to the Angel City games, and ounce for ounce, it's about as enjoyable sporting contest as I've ever enjoyed. It's fantastic.
Definitely. And even from the fan engagement side on the women's side, seemingly there's a lot more excitement, and especially when it comes to even the youth side and getting, young girls out to watch and finally having like real idols and role models to look at. It's right at the inception point, I think, of what the next couple of decades is going to look like on the women's side is really exciting, especially once corporate investment and everything really starts piling in as well. It's going to be right up there when it comes to money and the economic standpoint.
Totally agree.
Getting into, I guess, a bit of more of some of the eye openers of coming in, and you obviously have this pre-existing knowledge of the US soccer business landscape, and then you're in the Ipswich one now, and obviously I'm sure you learned a lot in turning over all of those stones and seeing different opportunities. But were there any kind of immediate things that caught you off guard or surprised you about how the business landscape differs in the UK versus in the US, or was it all pretty easy to figure out?
Again, I give all the credit to the incredible team and leadership of Mark Ashton. Like I said, if somehow the business plan was predicated on, in any regard or facet, my what I call leadership to get anything done in England, it would have been a colossal failure. Like, again, I mean, just unmitigated. I wouldn't have moved forward. To be blunt, I had the honor of meeting Mark Ashton at a USL board meeting. He gave a master class on English football. In short, I basically said if I ever was blessed to have an opportunity doing anything in England, I would do it with him. And so, unfortunately, the planets aligned to make that happen, and he deserves all the credit relative to it. So, again, I think when it comes to North America, for sure, I've made enough of the mistakes in this space to kind of, be able to say what not to do here in the United States. And again, owning a stadium, building a stadium is very valuable. Launching a men's team, having the ability to launch a women's team, doubles effectively the nights in the stadium. Having the ability to program additional sport and other activities above and beyond that's very important. But again, going back to why I like what I do day in and day out is I think in the right size stadium with the right, combination of ticket sales, sponsorship, and merchandise, that you actually can have a profitable team and you can have a profitable stadium. And then where I think it gets interesting is over time, can you have player development and transfers as a significant line item? Can you have increased media rights? Grow. The recent game between Louisville and Indianapolis, the ratings were fantastic. The quality of the product was outstanding. Again, on and off the pitch, anyone who tuned into that really got an eye-opening experience relative to the quality of USL. So again, one of many things that I feel like the future is so bright, if the US and USL can continue to march forward in a positive way, you should at some point see meaningful media rights. You should see meaningful, and you're starting to see it. Louisville and Orange County and some other clubs have made significant transfer fees, 7-figure transfer fees with percentage sell-on clauses in the contract. You do that enough time, you rinse and repeat that enough time on a USL level, that's a game-changing bottom line impact to these clubs. And then, then there's a host of other, things, sports betting, at least as an advertising line item, that should be, with the right club, right location, it's probably potentially a 7-figure relationship just on a sponsorship perspective. That's, might not really move the needle on an MLS perspective. It certainly moves it on a USL perspective.
Definitely. I mean, and you see that how apparent, especially the betting as an advertising standpoint is in the UK, like it's on so many different billboards, all the, jersey sponsors, everything. It's kind of ingrained in the culture of the sport in the UK, really.
But I think sports betting has gotten a little bit ahead of itself, especially given some of the things that are coming out in the headlines lately with so like increasingly I feel like fans want to bet. There's a market for it. You can't put the toothpaste back in the bottle. But again, I probably would sit there and say, look, I think, having a sponsorship relationship makes sense. But, I think some clubs have taken it a little bit, what I'd say potentially too far. But anyway, that's what the purpose of this show is for.
Definitely. No, definitely agree. I mean, Ivan Toney and everything is, a bit of a, yeah, it is what it is. To get into the future, I guess, then, and speaking about, we've mentioned the tournaments coming up, potentially the women's and the impact that Messi has had in the immediate, kind of standpoint, and hopefully that can bring higher quality players a bit sooner in their careers. Mm-hmm. What do you see the next decade or so, looking like for US soccer, of kind of harnessing the interest that'll come from these tournaments and then kind of building the legacy and not letting that all slip away? What do you think the next 10 to 15 years kind of looks like after all of this is done and past us?
Yeah, again, I can only speak for, what I'd say myself and my focus, and at the risk of, potentially being repetitive, I'm very invested, very focused on what I'd say is, USL, making USL as strong and as best a league as possible, not just North America, but just worldwide. And I think USL has a unique potential to be one of the greatest leagues in the world. I mean, now to kind of unpack that further, I think, God willing, we figure out a way to create what I would say is 3 levels of USL. And so you could truly adopt promotion and relegation within the USL ecosystem. Again, going back to, if you get the right ownership groups in the right markets with quality stadiums, good locations, where they have both a men's team and a women's team, they have a solid youth program where you truly have pathway to pro for the best and brightest of that. But then regardless, you just have great, game-changing sort of community support where kids have a place to go after school, you have access to the sport. I mean, all those things are catalytic. And again, with the utmost respect to MLS, increasingly USL can do this across the country. They can do it in a host of different markets. But again, none of it's easy. But if I have my way, over the next 10 years, USL will truly establish itself as a very strong, very sustainable, very robust soccer league that had the ability to support that vision on both the men's and women's side. And again, I think they're well positioned right now. The launch of USL Super League is a nice step in it. From my vantage point, again, it's a game changer to be able to offer both a men's and a women's team in my stadium. That's a game changer. And again, over time, I do believe, and I'm not trying to say any of it's easy, but I believe in the compelling element and the economic pathway that USL could potentially have to adopt promotion relegation. Said differently, it's tough to turn to someone who paid $400 or $500, $600 million for a franchise fee in MLS and say, look, we have too many franchises now. We actually have to have an A flight, a B flight, a premier, a championship. And guess what? You're in that. And so this is going to be completely different economics. You're not going to get this cut of the Apple deal. Whatever it would be. It's very tough and difficult to kind of explain that to an ownership group. I think at this stage, it's a lot easier for USL to adopt it and figure out, I don't necessarily view, first and foremost, I'm going to do everything possible to invest in the best product possible for my teams. So again, inherently, I'm not worried about relegation. If somehow we suffer relegation, you see time and time again, the fan base gets energized in terms of getting behind it and helping to get the team back up. I think Leeds is a perfect example. I think they sold more season tickets this season when they got relegated than they had last year in the Premier League. The fan base got behind the club to a whole nother level. So anyway, apologies for kind of sucking the wind out of this call, sucking the oxygen out of the call on this answer. But again, I am bullish, and it's important for people to understand this. I am bullish on soccer writ large in America. I have the utmost respect for MLS. I've just chosen to time my fate, my fortune, my work, my capital in the USL and this health, safety, sustainability of USL. And again, there's so many different factors that go into ultimately any of this. And it's kind of the same at any level. Really good ownership group, good stadiums, good locations, good youth program, good technical program, the ability to develop players. But the benefit that we have in USL is 10 years from now, I really believe we're going to be focused on how do we give the best quality minutes to young players. I'm not trying to compete with the Premier League. I'm not trying candidly to compete with MLS. I'm trying to develop the best players in the world, give them a platform, and then ideally have them go play in Portugal and France, God willing, in the Premier League one day. And so anyway, if we do all that right, I think this could be fantastic. And, and again, 10 years from now, MLS is still going to be a phenomenal franchise. I'm not quite sure, are they going to get a Haaland in his prime to come to MLS over Man City? I'm not sure of that. I think the Lionel Messis will always take a 3-year option at a $250 million salary all day long. But I don't know candidly how sustainable that is, to be honest.
Definitely. I mean, even, you think about Messi's intertwined with the Apple deal, and there's only so many of those that can be given out, so it's not really something that can be replicated on a scale.
And it's tough. You're the next Lionel Messi, and they're trying to get you to come to MLS, and I want the Apple deal and I want the Adidas deal. But how much oxygen is left in those deals to keep, carving that away? I'm not sure. But again, no one in MLS, I guarantee you, no one right now is complaining about the Messi effect. That's for sure. The question is it truly sustainable? What happens when he does hang up the cleats? Are the people paying $1,000 for the ticket, are they coming back? I'm not sure.
definitely agree. There's this immediate kind of excitement from it, and everything with the deal from, you know, financial side that, yeah, you can't really do 2 or 3 more of those. You know, you can't be bringing, yeah, to your point, anyone who's at the top of the game in their prime over here just yet. And then it's, is there diminishing returns, I guess, on bring them over at 37 and give them a percentage deal of the biggest media right deal that the league has ever had.
No, exactly. Exactly. You can't, I'm not sure how often you can rinse and repeat that. But look, just to sum it up, I think global football needs to focus on sustainability, writ large. And sustainability I define as kind of the ability for the franchise to sustain itself without having to continually raise capital of it. You know, like in other words, you just can't continue to have operating losses year in and year out and just hope that the equity appreciation fairies are going to bail you out. So I think the challenge that football has from my vantage point is, it's not just domestically, it's very, very much internationally. Way too many clubs are losing way too much money on way too consistent a basis. And that's not sustainable. So I am positively obsessed with trying to figure out, in particular in Rhode Island and then anywhere else I'm involved with, is how do you create the sustainability, which means profitable team, profitable stadium, and then profitable ventures around it, which is why, you know, again, real estate becomes so important.
Definitely. All right. Well, one thing, I know we're coming up towards time, and we've been finishing the podcast with asking, we call them quick fire questions. They aren't always quick. Because sometimes the questions,
because I probably answer them way too long.
No, but there's a few, you know, we always frame it as, you know, 1 word, 2 word, you know, sentence, but sometimes it can be another 5-minute response, which is great. You know, we love going deeper into anything. And again, that's the whole point. You know, we want people to really learn about what's going on. But anyway, we'll dive into our final 3 questions, and you can answer them as quick as you want, or you can dive even deeper as you wish. We will not hold you back.
All right.
But the first one, which will put you right on the spot, which is, we know that this weekend is the first game between your two lovers, essentially.
Yeah.
What scoreline are you hoping to see?
Oh, I just to be very, very clear, I'm all in on Rhode Island. Yeah, I was thrilled to celebrate the championship with Phoenix Rising, you know, last November, but that was effectively the true changing of the guard. I'm all in on Rhode Island. So I'd love a brilliant, beautiful game. I'd love to see Rhode Island be able to kind of have a clean sheet and win, if you will, at home. Have it be our first home victory. Not per se so much because it's against Phoenix Rising, but just because it's time for us to kind of break the seal on a home victory. So I'll go with a 2-0 Rhode Island FC victory.
Nice.
This coming Friday.
Nice. Perfect masterclass performance. All right, next one. Looking back so far, obviously you've had like such a successful, you know, quick career so far in soccer, both on the field and off the field, and everything's really prosperous looking for you. So we're excited to see everything that's next. But looking backwards, what is one lesson that you've learned through, let's call it trial and error, and running the businesses, that you wish you could know and going back and start it all over again?
Well, so early on, when I first invested in Arizona United, the predecessor team to Phoenix Rising, we were playing in a baseball stadium in Scottsdale. And with zero marketing, we could attract 5,000 fans to a game. With a little push, you could easily have 8,000 fans. You know, Saturday night, downtown Scottsdale. And again, that's where I kind of talk about the power of location. We lost our lease. I actually started raising capital with the whole business plan of eventually, you know, taking the club up to MLS. I ended up getting Diplo as an investor and a bunch of his associates. So I had kind of high profile. Pete Wentz from Fall Out Boy was also an investor. So I started to attract some really interesting strategic capital. I hired Frank Yallop to be our manager. And then I got completely blindsided where the San Francisco Giants, the baseball team, exercised an option that I wasn't aware of to actually play during the summertime. So we lost our lease. And out of pure desperation, I found a baseball park about an hour outside of Scottsdale in a retirement community called Peoria. And again, it was just pure desperation, but I truly couldn't give tickets away in Peoria. Our fan base was on the complete opposite side of the city, and I couldn't give tickets away. So that was ultimately, I'm haunted as a result of that. Like, I was very lucky to kind of trade through it and kind of get the group that came in and to rebrand it to Phoenix Rising. And the first thing we decided to do beyond changing the name was to build a modular stadium in a great location. And that literally put Phoenix Rising on the map. So again, I guess that's just go back to, as a result of the scars I have from that lesson, the import of having a great stadium in a great location. And the reality is, playing in a baseball stadium in Scottsdale is not ideal either. Like, that's not a long-term solution. You could have 15,000 showing up at any time anyone's going into a baseball stadium to watch a soccer game. Something's wrong.
Definitely. And I think we're seeing that firsthand up here with the Roots, and their kind of movement between different locations. And we spoke to Stephen Aldridge a few weeks ago. We had him on chatting about it as well. So there's definitely, it's crucial to own.
He's fantastic. And again, if any ownership group's going to figure it out, it'll be Steven and that crew. But Oakland's just such an outstanding franchise. The market's so good. I'm so proud of what they're doing up there, and it needs it. Like, I hate the thought of how easy these professional teams leave these cities. I just and now the Coyotes picking up and moving to Salt Lake. Like, people, some of these clubs are changing cities like people change shirts. It's just not right. But,
yeah. Definitely.
Anyway, that's why Oakland needs Oakland roots, if you will.
Now, it's impossible to build an Ipswich Town heritage and history if Ipswich were suddenly moved to Huddersfield.
Yeah, exactly.
And then final question, and this can be personally or professionally. We assume it'll be professionally. What's the one thing you're most looking forward to for the remainder of 2024?
Yeah, easy would be the continued progress on the stadium you see behind me. Ideally being in a position where we're on track to open up as early in the new year as possible. The steel started to go vertical about a week ago, which is a real transformation. And also I-95, the major highway that kind of north and southbound that goes right by our site, cars will now start to see the steel going up. So that's literally just an important visual milestone. So yeah, it all comes down to what I'm beyond excited about is next spring. And you guys welcome to join me. I'd be honored you guys can make it. But, the three of us, if you will, plus 11,000 of our best friends at that home opener. And that's going to be a very, very proud day. And I think, again, it'll be transformative relative to what I'm confident is just the trajectory of Rhode Island football. Thanks, guys. Bye.
Thanks for watching this episode of Off the Pitch. Don't forget to drop a follow or subscribe on the podcast platform you're listening from. That helps us bring stories like these to your ears each and every week. And if you have a minute, leave a review as well, as that helps us grow the Off the Pitch community and bring even more exciting guests on. See you in the next one.